The morning air was still, but Sergei's instincts screamed danger. His boots crunched over loose gravel as he approached a Soviet convoy stranded on a narrow mountain pass. The lead truck had been ripped open, metal twisted like paper, blood smeared the dirt. A young Afghan boy appeared on the ridge holding a white cloth. Sergei froze. The boy pointed to a boulder and ran. Sergei followed the signal and spotted it, an anti-tank mine wired to several shells, a Taliban trap. His breath quickened as he crouched, carefully cutting through the wires. Sweat dripped into his eyes. The detonator looked Soviet-made, but the setup was pure guerrilla ingenuity. "One wrong move," he muttered in Russian, "and I vanish." Behind him, a soldier whispered, "Can you do it?" Sergei didn't answer. His focus narrowed to the trembling wire in his pliers. A click echoed. His stomach dropped. Silence. Then, nothing. The mine was dead. Sergei exhaled, realizing the boy had saved them. But why? That question lingered like smoke, because in Afghanistan, trust could be a weapon sharper than steel. Rain lashed against the cracked pavement as Malik walked toward the empty lot where he spent his nights. His shoes squished with every step, soles worn thin. He pulled his hoodie tight, the fabric damp and heavy, clinging to his shivering frame. The sound of laughter drifted from a nearby diner, warmth and light mocking him through the glass. Malik paused, staring at families sharing meals, the smell of fried food curling into the cold night air. His stomach growled, but he pushed forward. He couldn't waste time feeling sorry for himself. Under an old billboard, he sat cross-legged, pulling out the crumpled notebook he always carried. Its pages were filled with sketches, numbers, and plans, a roadmap to the future he believed was still possible. He whispered to himself, one day, this won't be my life." But reality bit hard. He was homeless, broke, and invisible. Who would take him seriously? Who would trust a plan drawn up by a kid with nothing? Still, Malik clenched his fist around the pen. He had a plan, and he was determined to find someone willing to listen, even if it meant risking everything. Marcus sat on the cold concrete steps of the shopping plaza, clutching the worn notebook that held his dreams. His stomach growled like an angry beast, but hunger wasn't the worst part. It was the way people looked at him, like he didn't exist. Then, a sleek black car stopped in front of him. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a tailored navy suit. His shoes gleamed like polished mirrors. Marcus didn't need an introduction. This was Jonathan Kane, one of the city's richest men, a name Marcus had written 100 times in that very notebook. Jonathan's sharp eyes scanned him briefly, then focused on his phone as if Marcus were nothing more than part of the sidewalk. But Marcus's heart pounded. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the one chance to turn everything around. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said, his voice trembling but firm. Jonathan paused, glancing down with a mix of curiosity and annoyance. "What do you want, kid? Spare change?" Marcus swallowed hard, clutching his notebook tighter. "No, sir. I want to offer you a deal." Jonathan raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "A deal? From you?" Marcus nodded, his eyes burning with determination. "Yes, and it's worth more than money." The billionaire, Mr. Reynolds, leaned back in his sleek leather chair, eyeing Jamal with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. The office around them gleamed with wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished marble floors, and a massive oak desk that could pay for a year's rent in Jamal's neighborhood. "You've got guts, kid," Reynolds said finally, his deep voice calm but firm. "But guts don't make money. Plans do. And I don't see any proof yours will work." Jamal swallowed hard. "Give me 1 week," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of nerves inside him. "Just 1 week to show you it's possible. No money up front. Just trust." Reynolds smirked, intrigued. 1 week, and if you fail? Jamal hesitated, then clenched his fists. "If I fail, I'll walk away and never bother you again." Reynolds rose, towering over him. "Fine, 1 week. But remember, if you're lying to me, this door closes forever." Jamal nodded, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. This was his chance. The biggest gamble of his life. Tomorrow, the clock would start ticking. Clock. The bus finally stopped in the heart of the city, its doors hissing open with a tired sigh. Malik stepped out first, his suit now wrinkled and his shoes scuffed from the long journey. The twins clung to his hands, their faces pale with exhaustion but eyes shining with hope. Behind them, Aisha descended slowly, carrying the smallest child in her arms. Her strength was nearly gone, but her will burned bright. They stood together on the pavement, staring at the towering buildings, their glass windows reflecting the morning sun like 1,000 eyes. This was a world that had never been meant for them, a place of polished shoes and whispered deals. Yet, for the first time in days, they allowed themselves to breathe. Malik turned to Aisha, his jaw tight with emotion. "I can take them from here," he said softly, though his voice trembled. Aisha shook her head, her eyes glistening. "No, we finish this together." And so, side by side, they walked into the unknown. A mother, a businessman, and 3 children bound not by blood, but by something stronger. A promise made on a broken street, under a sky heavy with fate. The rain poured relentlessly, soaking the cracked sidewalks of downtown. Malik pulled his torn hoodie tighter around his shoulders, his stomach growling louder than the thunder. He was 16, homeless, and tired of promises that never came true. Tonight, he had nothing, not a dollar, not even hope. But as he passed the glowing windows of a luxury restaurant, he stopped dead in his tracks. Inside sat a man in an immaculate grey suit, laughing effortlessly with people who smelled like money. A millionaire. Malik didn't know his name yet, but he knew one thing. This man represented everything he'd never had. For a moment, Malik stared at his own reflection in the glass. Mud-streaked face, shoes with holes, eyes that carried years of struggle. Something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to beg for spare change this time. He was going to make an offer, a plan so bold it could change everything. Heart pounding, Malik pushed open the heavy glass door, rain dripping onto the marble floor. Heads turned. The boy no one noticed on the streets was about to walk into a world he didn't belong to, and he was ready to speak. The knock on the prison meeting room door was soft but sharp enough to freeze her breath. Jessica's heart pounded as the guard opened it. 3 men stepped inside. For a moment, time collapsed. These weren't the boys she once knew. They were grown, confident, dressed in sharp suits. "Jess," said the tallest, his voice breaking. "It's us." Tears welled in Jessica's eyes. Memories of cold nights on the streets, of little hands clutching hers, of laughter despite hunger, all came flooding back. She tried to speak but only managed a whisper. "You came." "We never forgot what you did," the second man said, his voice steady with emotion. "You saved our lives. Now it's our turn." Jessica's hands trembled as one of them held her tight. For 25 years, they had been gone. She had believed the world forgot her, that her sacrifice meant nothing. But now, standing before her, were the living proof that her love had not been wasted. And in that moment, the darkness of the last 2 decades cracked open, just enough for light to pour in. Days blurred into nights as Jack moved under the constant shadow of paranoia. Every whisper in the marketplace, every unfamiliar glance on the road, felt like a noose tightening around his neck. Somewhere out there, the KGB knew he had betrayed them. One evening, as the sun bled across the desert horizon, Jack knelt in the dust, sweating over an unexploded aerial bomb. The steel casing radiated a deadly promise. "If this goes off, I'll never know what hit me," he muttered. His hands trembled, but not from fear of death, from fear of capture. He clipped the final wire and exhaled slowly, the silence around him ringing like a scream. Then, a sound, a crunch of gravel. Jack's head snapped up. A figure stood on the ridge, watching, too far to see a face. The silhouette lingered for a heartbeat, and then was gone. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. The desert wind hissed through the cracks of his shelter, carrying ghosts of the past, of Moscow's streets, of the faces of men he'd betrayed. His defection wasn't just a choice, it was a death sentence. And Jack knew the executioner was getting closer. Night draped the mountains in silence, but inside the Afghan camp, whispers carried louder than gunfire. Nikolai crouched near the glow of a dwindling fire, sharpening his knife with slow, deliberate strokes. He felt eyes on him, too many eyes. The men who once called him brother now studied him as if he were a wolf among sheep. A fighter approached, his hand lingering on the stock of his rifle. "You talk too much to that American," he said, voice laced with suspicion. Nikolai didn't look up. "And you listen too much to your fear," he replied, his tone calm, almost cold. The fighter spat on the ground and walked away, but Nikolai knew the seed was planted. Tomorrow, one of them might pull the trigger on him before the Soviets ever got the chance. Later, lying under the vast Afghan sky, he stared at the stars and thought of home. Not Moscow, but the idea of peace, something that felt as distant as those constellations. If he didn't move soon, he'd end up a corpse in the dirt, betrayed by men who once trusted him. And so, in the dead of night, Nikolai made a decision that would change everything.